Hi, my name is Deb, and this is my furry feathered sidekick, Kylie, and today we're here to kick off a new vlog, Reading for the Birds. When I wound up with several books on my TBR for the month where I saw birds repeating on the cover, it's only right to throw a bird mask on the dog, add in some more bird covers, and make it a theme. So here we are, reading books with birds on the cover. I have a TBR in mind for this. I could potentially always shift things around a little bit, but two of the arcs that I definitely need to get to this month have birds on the cover, so we'll start there. The Hitchcock Hotel by Stephanie Roble. This is a gifted e-arc from Berkeley, and it comes out on September 24th. We're following a man who is a tremendous Hitchcock fan, and he has opened a hotel themed all around the master. And it's now the 1-year anniversary of this hotel, and he invites a whole bunch of old friends to come celebrate with him. He hasn't talked to them in years. Something happened, and we don't from the synopsis know what that is, but it says, who better to help him finish the hotel? After all, no Hitchcock set is complete without a body. So this sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to this one. The second book I have that is an arc is the Book of Witching by C.J. Cook. This one also is a gifted arc from Berkeley. This one comes out on October 8th. In this one, it sounds like we're following Clem, who is the mother of a 19-year-old daughter. She gets a call that her daughter's in the hospital after a terrible hiking accident, which has put her in the hospital. Her boyfriend has been killed and her best friend's missing. But when Clem's daughter, Erin, awakes, she doesn't recognize her mother and she's calling herself Nyx. Now Clem is going back to the scene of the accident to try to figure out what went wrong. This one sounds perfect for spooky, witchy season. Then in terms of getting to some of the books that I own from book boxes, I have Woodworm, which is by Layla Martinez, and this is translated by Sophie Hughes and Annie McDermott. This one came in a Nightworm subscription box, and it does have a bird up there at the top, and it even has a bird on the signed signature plate that they sent with it. I don't know a lot about this one, but it says, the house breathes, the house holds bodies and secrets, the house is visited by ghosts, by angels that line the roof like insects, and by saints that burn the bed sheets with their halos. That has me intrigued enough to pick this one up, so I was glad to see a bird on the cover, so I could add it to this vlog. And then from a Twisted Retreat box, I have Girl Among Crows by Brendan Veo, and this one I have had on my radar as one I want to get to. Obviously I own it. I have this fun special edition, but also it was mentioned by Lexi by Books with Lexi in her spooky season challenge TBR that this one is related to cults, which is one of the prompts that I needed for that. So this got bumped up my list, and so the bird cover works quite well for it. It says, child abductions 30 years apart, uncanny parallels but no solid leads. Only eerie reminders of a bloodthirsty cult that hopes to appease a Norse god. Daphne Gage risks her marriage, family, and even her life to expose a terrifying truth. So definitely going to get to this one. And then last but not least, I wanted to get in a couple of finished copies that publishers have sent me. So this one's a little less prominent, but The Second Husband by Kate White has a lot of birds on the cover. They're just really small. This one, we are following a woman whose first husband was murdered. She's now moved on. She's married to a new man, and the case for her first husband gets reopened. So it sounds like it'll be a twisty psychological thriller, and I look forward to adding in hopefully a thrilling read. And I received a gifted copy of this one from Harper. And last but not least, I have one more that I added for my spooky season challenge. The TBR for that will be linked because that is already up, but I picked up Pink Slime, and at first I didn't think this was a bird cover, but I'm not sure how well it's going to show up on camera exactly, but there is in fact a bird there when I really was looking at the cover randomly and thought I would throw it in for this vlog. So if look, I think down there, This one is set in a future which has been decimated by an algae bloom, and this is causing a plague among people. And it sounds like a interesting, very different book to the rest of these to add some variety. So I have a lot of reading to get to and a lot of updates to get you, and hopefully I'll find a couple fun, maybe bird related things to throw into the theme as we go. So with that, I'll leave you here and I'll get to reading and be back once I have some initial thoughts. Okay, I have started The Second Husband by Kate White, and I have some initial thoughts. Not a lot of them, but some. This one, we are following Emma, who is a young woman, relatively recently married, but this is her second husband. Her first husband was killed in what seemed to be a random act of violence when he was away from home for a conference, and Emma was involved throughout that investigation, a person of interest at the time because, of course, the spouse always is, but nothing came of it. No one was ever found to be to blame for killing her husband, and she's moved on with her life. She's sitting down to have lunch or tea or something with a new friend, and she's excited for this, only to have it interrupted by police coming to her door saying they're reopening the investigation. It's just a routine thing. There's not necessarily any new information, but they're looking into it again, and this has Emma really nervous. We're getting hints from Emma that there's things the police didn't find out about her, that things with her husband weren't quite as cut and dried and wonderful as she made him out to be at the time, and that's kind of where we're at. It's an easy read. It's definitely one that's keeping my attention enough for the moment. I don't necessarily love any of the characters. I think this new best friend character comes in and understandably is very curious about police coming to the door and revealing the fact that you have a husband who was killed. But that relationship being new and this all happening at once has me questioning things. We've got a brother-in-law who definitely doesn't like Emma, and the feeling is mutual. The husband, Tom, and the life they've put together to kind of restart her life in some ways, I feel like I'm still getting to know. Currently, at about the third of the way through, I'm not necessarily feeling like this is doing something that a lot of other thrillers hasn't done before, but the synopsis promises a unpredictable psychological thriller, so I am looking forward to continuing to see if it does throw in some twists that I'm not expecting and see where we get up to. So I'll let you know once I know. I'm back to do a quick update on The Second Husband. Quick, I say, because I don't have a ton of thoughts about this one. It promised to be a twisty ride, and I didn't really find any of the twists super surprising for it. I do wonder, maybe if I wasn't a huge thriller reader, I wasn't reading a ton of thrillers, maybe some of the surprises would have thrown me a little bit more, but I felt like the reveals were kind of just too easy. Like, I expected there to be a shock, but the reveals kind of happened with somebody saying, oh, by the way, I did this. And the character going, oh, I didn't think it was you. And kind of going along those route throughout the book. So there were characters that the author seemed to be really pushing the reader to suspect. And yes, they were being very sus, but being a thriller reader, I don't think I ever believe when an author's that heavy-handed with trying to tell the reader who to suspect that they're actually going to wind up being the culprit. So hopefully I'm being vague enough. I don't think I'm going into spoilers too much here, but I think it was a fine read. It was easy enough, but it wasn't one that called me to pick it up. It took me, I think, 4 days to get through, which should have been a really easy one-day type of read for me. So I think it's not one I'm really going to overly recommend that you have to go out of your way to read, but it's definitely worth a read if it sounds like something that is interesting to you. It leans more into domestic thriller, I think, than psychological thriller in my mind. I think the writing was fine. I think the characters were fairly well developed. It does hit on some issues of loss and how loss hits different people differently. And I think some of that had some good discussions to it. So this winds up being kind of a very mid-3 type of read for me. And I will be moving on, hopefully, to something that draws me in much more. I'm now about 45% of the way into Pink Slime, and this is by Fernanda Trias, and it is a translated novel translated by Heather Cleary. And it is a horror. I would say it's a literary horror. I'm not sure exactly how it classifies itself, but it's set in a dystopian future where there is some sort of environmental issue that has created some new diseases, new trauma to the world, and being along the coast creates a exposure to this. The book really brings you right into the middle of things without fully explaining things from the beginning, and you do pick up the details as you go. The synopsis calls it a mysterious plague and an algae bloom that has poisoned the air coming off the water. And that has kind of spread in a lot of ways, where suddenly the winds that are coming in from the coast are taking this plague inland more. The places along the coast, which if you think about California, usually your coastal areas are the places people want to be, are now kind of the slums where people are trying to get away from the ocean and from this disaster. This has impacted everything from food. The algae bloom has killed off all the fish. It's impacting things more inland as well. They're living off of other things, and there's a lot going on. We're following our main character, who I'm not even sure if she has a name or if I've just forgotten it, but it's first person. The synopsis calls her the narrator. We've got her mother who lives a bit more inland, who wants to see her daughter move away. She's taking care of a young boy with a disability or a disease of his own, which I believe is separate from this plague and has its own set of issues. Also a lot of talk with that about how other people view people with disabilities and kind of visually obvious differences. She also has a man that she cares about who's been inflicted with some of the problems that this world is facing. And all of these things are kind of jumbled in and happening in between glimpses of the world and what has happened to the world. So it's definitely a horror story. It's dystopian, which to my mind sometimes leans more sci-fi, but in this case I do think it is very horror-based, not science-based. Our main character doesn't know all of the reasons of what's going on, although we get some answers as the story goes along. I think the character development in here is really good. I really like the writing. I can see why this book has been translated into so many languages and has won awards as well. The author is from Bogota, I think it said originally, or she lives in Bogota. She was born in Uruguay, and I'm really liking her writing in here. I think it's definitely slow burn, so you're not going in expecting big wild chaos speedy pace, but I'm really enjoying it. I got through the first half really quickly. It's a very short book. It's almost, I would call it a novella. It's a little over, barely over 200 pages, but I'm going to be continuing on with this. I have to go get an oil change in my car, so I think this will get me through waiting at the dealership for that, and I'll be back once I have final thoughts. Turns out an oil change was exactly the right amount of time that I needed to finish up Pink Slime. And before I even forget, I would say that even though it took me a while to see the bird on the cover, the birds actually were relevant to the plot, or at least relevant to the concept of this dystopia that's happening. Because even though the fish were very much an obvious issue for the world, you see on page the fish having turned up all dead because of this algae bloom, there's also a lot of speculation that's happening about what happened to the birds. They just kind of disappeared, kind of a silent going missing type of a thing, not an obvious spectacle, but something that gets noticed, and no one ever really sees birds again. And it is a topic of conversation that keeps coming up in here, and therefore I'm glad that I noticed the bird on the cover to include this one for this theme. The story overall I enjoyed. It held my attention, which is saying something something, especially as I was reading it in a very kind of chaotic setting with lots of announcements going on and people moving around and all of that. So the fact that it held my attention says a lot of good things about this. It is very slow burn. I feel like I've been saying that about so many books recently, but it definitely was. And you get bits and pieces of the world and the characters and the relationships back and forth through time. I also thought it really interesting the way the author puts like little conversations or even almost little bits of poetry in between chapters, and I really liked that and those little glimpses of moments as well, separate kind of from the narrative, though it certainly does interrelate to what's going on in this world. I thought the writing in particular was beautiful, and the discussions of disability and disease and what relationships go through in this world was very interesting. It's not the type of book where you're really going to get answers. You're not going to get a finished feeling at the end of this book. Not that it didn't feel like a finished book, but just there are a lot of open-ended things. And in this type of world, that makes sense. I kind of expected that as I was reading in this, but it is something to be aware of. I know some of my friends out there don't deal well with unanswered questions. So I wouldn't recommend this to them per se, but I do recommend it. I think it's really well written. I think it's a little bit weird. It's a lot of bit interesting, and I had a good time with it. So I'm glad that I picked it up for my bird vlog. So with that, I will move on, and I'll be back once I have something else to talk to you about. Okay, you're getting a low quality update here on Wormwood. It's short. I don't want to say too much at this point because I think my final thoughts probably aren't going to change a whole lot. But this is Wormwood by Leila Martinez, and it's translated fiction, and I'm liking it so far. I didn't know really what to expect going into it. The synopsis is very vague and kind of weird and different, and I think that's appropriate for the book. It also is kind of weird and different in a way that I'm mostly liking so far. It took me a little bit to kind of settle into it. Partly, possibly, I started this just the first few pages while I was waiting for my car to get the oil change done, and I think I wasn't as focused as I needed to be with this book to start with. We're following two different characters, alternating chapters for their different POVs, and it took me a minute to realize we had changed perspectives in the second chapter. I wouldn't necessarily say I feel like the narrative voice of the two characters is very different, but I think part of that is when we are with the grandmother, we're mostly hearing things that happened quite a ways back, and that makes sense then because she's kind of the same age as her granddaughter when we're in her granddaughter's head. The grandmother has a commentary about her daughter who went missing and about her granddaughter who is with her in this very weird, very creepy house that creates a lot of chaos. This house has hunger. It's causing trouble. There are weird things that kind of attach themselves to the women of this house, and tragedy seems to follow them. Like I said, we're following the grandmother and the granddaughter. The mother is missing. She went missing quite a while back, and that's kind of had some lore attached to it. Then there's also a young boy that went missing when the granddaughter was watching him, and now that's two disappearances tied to their family, and that's creating a lot of attention on them. So all of this is to say that I'm really enjoying the house and the weirdness that's going on there. The fact that it eats people quite literally, and that we learn very quickly toward the beginning of this book. And I'm intrigued to see where the story is really going to head, what the final plot is really going to be with it. I am about halfway into it. This one came in my Nightworms subscription, and I usually have pretty good time with the books that they send us. So I'm glad this one is working in that direction as well, and I will let you know once I finish it what my final thoughts are. Continuing on in my bird journey, I have finished Woodworm, which I keep wanting to call Wormwood for whatever reason, and I apologize if I've actually done that in the space of this vlog. I don't know. But anyway, I had mixed feelings about this one. I really liked a lot of the creepy elements. I loved how this house really was part of the story and almost a character in the story. I liked seeing how there was kind of a blend between what's real, what's not in here. And I think the haunting atmosphere was really well done. The plot I struggled more so with. I think the way we're going back and forth between the grandmother and the granddaughter as characters and their different perspectives, there wasn't enough distinction, I think, between their voices for me, and I a couple times had to kind of reorient myself within a chapter as to who we were following and what time period we were in. The house is so consistent as the story goes along that didn't really give any clues itself. I did also feel like the concept of them being trapped by this house was a little confusing, just in the sense that part of the issue is one of the characters does leave the house and things happen during that, and while they're away from the house things get stirred up. So it wasn't exactly, I think, what I was expecting when it came to isolated setting either, but I thought it was beautifully written. I thought the writing was really good. The pacing was a little up and down for me. There were parts where I felt like it got a little bit slow, but it is only 150 pages, so it didn't ever feel too slow because it was such a quick read for me. So I am glad that I picked this up. I'm glad that this vlog gave me an excuse to pick it up, because it wasn't one that I immediately thought of for a bird, but I was glad to be able to get to it. So in the end, this one wound up being a high 3.5 or a 4 for me. So still a good time, if not one that's necessarily going to live in my mind long term. And with that, I will be back once I have more bird book thoughts. Okay, I have some birdie updates for you. And before I actually get to the reading ones, the exciting new addition to our home is a bird feeder. I was thinking, what could I do that fit with the bird theme? And we have some hummingbirds that come around quite frequently, and there's nothing for them on my patio, but they do pay a visit most days at some point, buzzing on through. So I thought, why not get them a feeder? I have a hook out on my patio and plenty of space to put one in. So I thought that would be a lot of fun. I found a pretty one that I really liked just through Amazon and bought some nectar and set it all up. So we've been getting some interest from them. The next step is going to be teaching Kylie not to bark at the hummingbirds, because they kind of buzz and sometimes buzz a little too closely to her and they react. And they don't like the fact that she's barking at them. That will kind of chase them away. So we're working on that. The squirrels are much more devious creatures. They know full well that she can't reach them, and they will just sit there and stare at her barking at them and laugh. The birds, they haven't quite figured out that she has no power over them. They're way out of her reach. So it'll be an ongoing training exercise to get that under control. Anyway, I have now started my next bird book, which is The Hitchcock Hotel by Stephanie Roble. And this one comes out on the 24th of September from Berkeley, and it's a gifted e-arc. I did actually pick up the audio arc for this as well from PRH Audio, and it is one that I started it today and I flew through the first half and actually had to stop myself so I could give you guys an update before I got too far into it. As far as themes go, there's a little bird, of course, on the cover, but also the opening chapter is from one of the bird's perspectives. So that was an interesting surprise as the book started. I don't necessarily love books that are from animal perspectives, but in this case it was an interesting way to start it and I appreciated that. We've got a group of friends and they they've joined at this former friend's hotel, which is dedicated to Hitchcock. Back in high school, they were all part of a movie club together where they watched a lot of Hitchcock. This particular friend is someone who is absolutely obsessed. He's put money into buying souvenirs from different sets and things, and he just seems a bit of an oddball character. We're following in his POV and swapping in with some of the other people at the hotel. They're the only guests at this point in time. There's some staff there as well. Sorry, Kylie's running around in the background, but I'm running out of space on my card, so we're just gonna let her do that and finish this update. So far, this is reminding me a lot of Lucy Foley's Hunting Party, just in the way the dynamic of the friend group is. And I'm liking this one more. So don't get me wrong, I didn't love Hunting Party, but some of the dynamics here where you've got some bad relationships, you've got some rivalries, you've got some other elements going on just really remind me of the friend group from that book. So I'm trying not to think of the comparisons too much since I didn't love that one. This one, I think with the Hitchcock twist to it and all of that, I do enjoy. The book does at one point give the reader a hint that this will spoil some Hitchcock movies, but you've had eons to watch those if you really cared about seeing them before you got spoiled for them. But I thought it was interesting that, you know, a couple chapters in, it does have a note about that. Anyway, I'm having a good time with this one. It is flying by. It's something I'm finding very intriguing. We're starting to get some darker twists, I think, and I'm looking forward to finding out where it goes. And then I'll let you know my final thoughts. I finished up the Hitchcock Hotel today, and overall I had a good time with this one. It wasn't one that super duper wowed me, but it winds up being about, I'd say, a 3.5 rounding to 4. And I think at the halfway point, or just past the halfway point, we wound up getting some reveals and twists that I did not expect, which was fun. And then the characters wound up having a little bit more interest for me as we got further into the book, which was a nice addition as well. Toward the end, we wind up getting kind of that villain monologue type of style reveal, and that's not my favorite, but I did actually like the way the story went with what was revealed at the end, so I had a little bit of mixed feelings with that. We do also return kind of to the bird POV at the very end, also just for a brief bit, and I like how the author used that at the beginning and the end to kind of tie the whole book together. The birds do come up, not regularly, I wouldn't say, in the story, but they definitely are something that is talked about as the story goes. So that was a fun inclusion for this whole theme. Kylie needed to tell you she enjoyed it too. Actually, Kylie's just overexcited because I went to my parents' house without her, which means that I saw my parents' dog and I came home smelling like their dog, and she feels cheated on and now needs extra attention. Yeah, is that what's going on here? She also was supposed to get some new toys as part of the theme for this particular vlog, but BarkBox apparently is upgrading its warehouses and therefore they're really behind on shipping. We haven't even received our August box yet and it's already almost halfway through September. So the order that was supposed to have the bird gift for Kylie won't be coming probably until October at this rate, so probably won't make it into this one. She's feeling very left out. So anyway, Hitchcock Hotel was a lot of fun. I think if you like Hitchcock, I think it has some nice nods to that. I think you don't have to like Hitchcock or even know really anything about him. I think the discussions in here about horror and about movies and what makes a perfect murder and all of that would still be interesting even if you didn't know the background. So this was a fun one and I'm looking forward to picking up my next bird book, and I will be back once I do. Kylie's learning to watch the birdies instead of bark at the birdies. I have an update for you on Girl Among Crows. I just have it in the naked hardcover right now because I didn't put the cover back on it. And I wanted to enjoy how pretty this is because unfortunately it's a DNF for me. I just couldn't get into it. I read the first 86 pages. I had the audiobook, so I tried audio, I tried reading it physically, and there's just something about the writing style that's just not pulling me in. There's so many interesting ideas in here, but they're just not pulling me. We're following mainly Daphne Gage, who is in the present day a married woman, 2 children, and in the past she was one of the youngest children of a pastor or minister or priest. I'm not sure what he was. Details are already fuzzy even though I was reading this just yesterday. And there is a backdrop of a cult of the Raven, which brings me to my first kind of complaint is why is this Girl Among Crows when all of the bird imagery in this story so far is about ravens? I don't know. Maybe there's a reason for it later on in the book. Couldn't tell you. There seems to be some supernatural elements happening in here, some ability that the participants in this cult are possessing. The cult seems to be involving these families giving their children over to this cult in a way where the children maybe are safe in the end or not. I don't know. It's very confusing to me. There's children who have gone missing over the years. That's part of it. And we're going back and forth in time between the present day and the past. And in the present, all of the characters really are broken. They're there, they're not there anymore. A lot of people have died. There's just so many elements going on in here, and I just wasn't tracking them in a way that really invested me in the story. And I gave it a fair shot, I think. I was trying to get through the first 100 pages, and it just wasn't doing it for me. So there's better books out there. I'm going to put this one down, unfortunately. And whether I'm going to keep it on my shelf because it is pretty, I don't know, but we'll see. But anyway, I do have one more bird book to get to that I am definitely planning on reading for this vlog, so I will be doing that shortly, and I'll be back once I get going on my final book. When you're filming a bird vlog, it seems like a good excuse to pick up some fried chicken with the groceries. Kylie agrees. I have now started my final book for this birds vlog, and that is The Witching by C.J. Cook. And this is a gifted e-arc from Berkeley. In this one, we are following a woman named Clem, and she is at home when she gets a call that no mother wants to get. Her teenage daughter is in the hospital, gravely injured. She had been away with friends, camping or exploring, and her boyfriend's dead, her friend is missing, and she's in the hospital with some severe injuries. When the daughter Erin wakes up, she doesn't recognize her mother, and she's calling herself someone named Nix, and everyone's confused. They're concerned about the missing friend. They are obviously wanting to know what happened that resulted in her boyfriend's death, and they're trying to find out what is going on. We're also following a second timeline, which is in, I believe it's 1594, and we're following Allison, who is a woman who has some witchy abilities, but she's left that kind of root, and she's using her abilities to create tonics and things to help cure people of illnesses and so forth. There's interesting twists to the kind of magic involved here where different spells work differently. The ability to cast spells is impacted kind of by your life experiences, it sounds like, so that's an interesting element to it. She winds up being accused of doing witchcraft, and they're trying to get her to confess and tell them that yes, she did this, even though she's not actively involved in this group of witches. They have a book that is their kind of, I guess, holy relic almost, I would call it, and I really don't know yet how these two timelines are going to wind up intersecting. Going into this book and just having read the synopsis, I didn't expect it to be as much about about the historical fiction as it's proving to be. I am much more intrigued by the present day stuff because we've got those mystery elements of what happened, trying to piece together why is Erin presenting as Nyx instead of herself. We get little glimpses of Erin in the mix of everything, but how did she wind up in this situation? Why was she even in this place where they were found to begin with? There's so many more questions, I think, for me in the present day timeline that I keep wanting to get back to that. With the historical timeline, I think it's well written. I think it's horrifying what we're seeing our main character have to go through and everything involved there, but it's much more of a linear timeline, I would say. There's not a lot of mystery going on. It's persecution of witchcraft and men doing bad things to women. The book definitely has some gore and some disturbing imagery in it as well, so do know that going in. I think I'll have a better ability to kind of put my thoughts together hopefully at the end of the book, but just wanted to share where I'm at the halfway point, and I will be back with you once I finished. Okay, I'm back for my final update in the bird vlog, and I have now finished the Book of Witching. I will say that I did get more invested as we got further into the book, so that improved for me. I think as we got further in, the historical timeline kind of reached its climax a little bit earlier, and we kind of shifted a little bit to focusing more on the present day. And as we started getting answers and started to see how the timelines were going to work together, I think that improved my reading experience with this book. That said, I wasn't 100% ever invested in it. I did like it. I did want to know answers, but I feel like there were a few things that could have been fleshed out a little bit more, a few answers that could have been a little bit more clear when it comes to the way that Erin and her boyfriend and her friend got involved in this whole thing and all of the ways that resolved in the end. But I think we got enough of a satisfying set of answers that I felt like it was feeling like a completed novel. It does end in a way that opens up some more questions, in the way a lot of thrillers kind of do that final twist that leaves things a little bit in suspense. So I think that was kind of as intended, but overall this winds up being a 3.5 for me. So with this, I am going to go ahead and wrap up this vlog here. I am disappointed that we didn't get Kylie's bird toys for the vlog because I always have fun getting to introduce her to new toys as part of these themes. That's a good excuse to do some dog shopping, but that's okay. I'll probably at some point share them on my Bookstagram stories just to be able to share what she got. But in the meantime, I had a lot of fun with this vlog. The bird feeder on my patio is making me very happy having it out there. Kylie's getting much better about just sitting and watching the birds and not reacting to them, so I'm pleased with that as well. And I had a bit of a mixed reading experience with this one. I really enjoyed, I think The Hitchcock Hotel probably was my favorite out of these, and Pink Slime I enjoyed as well. Some of them were a little bit more middle of the way type of books, not love, not hate, but I still had a good time. So let me know in the comments below, have you read any of these books? Do you have any favorite bird covers? Let me know all the things. And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, of course, the obvious is a bird emoji. I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button below if you enjoyed this vlog, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my content and my bookish thoughts and my themed vlogs. I have a lot of really fun stuff coming in October, I think, to bring some Halloween and spooky season spirit into this channel. But for now, I will go ahead and leave you here and catch you real soon in a new video.